the things that happens as a result of having a son who's moderately autistic, who's level 2 autistic, is you begin to wonder how many people there are out there, particularly in mild autism or Asperger's, level 1, right, autism, that are undiagnosed. And you begin to think about groups of people for whom this might be somewhat the case. And among them, you think about people like programmers, data analysts, and engineers. Hello, this is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm Kurt. I am your host this morning. Today is Monday, the 23rd of November of 2020, and I'm glad to have you aboard. I'm glad to have those on Rumble, the podcast, and YouTube joining me this morning. Remember that the podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. You can probably find me either looking for the Daily Summation or more likely Kurt's Religion and Politics on each of those platforms. So I really do wonder how many of those people in question talked about are potentially mildly autistic. Now, I would assume many of them are quite mild so that it's almost unnoticeable in many regards. So it's probably not that serious a thing for those individuals, though a lot of them are admittedly probably socially awkward and so forth, more prone to look at data and work to understand the world in ways that other people are not interested in doing. And the thing about it is, there is a part of the thing that leads me to question whether or not this is true, is that a lot of these people are almost OCD in the way that they deal with their worlds. They're almost obsessive compulsive disorder in the way they deal with their world, right? Particularly when it comes to dealing with data and so forth. They have to look at things in really detailed ways and have really serious understanding of data in various ways. And like I say, that pretty much, programmers, data analysts, engineers, certain kinds of statisticians, obviously, accountants potentially, and others. There are a good many who there's a sort of this requirement that they actually be very, I don't want to use the standard term, but very picky, very ticky, very fussy about data, right? And the thing of it is, people who are not part of their world have a hard time understanding just how important it is in their world to be detail-oriented, right? To really focus on things, to have attention to detail. And so a lot of people, their viewpoint on life is very much more generic. And quite frankly, for many of us, it's rather a frustrating thing that this is true, because in our minds, people miss a lot of very important information because, as the old expression goes, the devil is in the details, right? A lot of what you deal with, if you look at it on the surface, it looks like one thing, but if you actually dig in and try to understand what's going on, it's the details that'll show you what's really happening lots of times. So the thing is, when you have people around you who are going, this is this, and you're going, no, because you're not looking at this, the other. So I had somebody present a riddle right on one of the social media sites, and other people answered the riddle how they thought it should go. And I looked at the riddle and said, no, because you're missing this factor and this factor and this factor that make a difference, that are significant to the answer, to the outcome that must happen. The same thing happened to me when I was in high school. I was in a law class, right? We were studying law on a very rudimentary level. It wasn't like a college course or anything like that. But one of the things that they were doing is looking at cases and trying to come to the conclusion how the case was decided. Well, there was this one case, and everybody else in the class had pretty much decided that the case should be decided like this, as opposed to how it was being decided. I said, no, it should be decided like that. Well, the teacher, of course, had a key that she was able to use to look at the case. And she looked at the case and she said, it says here that it was decided like this, but we think basically as a class, they all decided that it should be decided like that. All but one person, me. And I sat there and I said, no, it should be decided this way, and here's why. And I laid out the case and explained to people what they were missing in the details that made it possible for them to see, actually there really is something to the idea that this should be decided like the book says, and like this individual, like Kurt has said it should. By the way, in case you're wondering, in case I've forgotten, I am Kurt, and I am the host of this little segment for the time being and probably for the foreseeable future. Anyway, so the point is that you may not understand the significance of that level of detail orientation. And I admit there are times that it gets in the way. There are times that I don't find things funny like a lot of people do. And I've said this before, it's very possible I'm mildly autistic. I've never been diagnosed, but I may very well be level 1 autistic. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm that guy who doesn't get jokes, who's socially awkward, who doesn't have a lot of friends, and so forth. And again, I think that that's probably true for a lot of people who are by nature detail-oriented in their view of the world. Okay, as I think a lot of those people, in order to be able to take the right approach, the right perspective, to look at things from a detailed viewpoint, I think they have to abandon a lot of the things that other people consider fun, funny, exciting, and interesting. That doesn't mean we don't find anything fun, funny, exciting, or interesting. It just means that the things that you find fun, funny, exciting, and interesting are not the same things we do, as a rule. And by the way, it's fair to say that among the people who are detail-oriented, they won't necessarily match it at that either. And among the people who aren't, they won't necessarily match that way either. But the point is that in general, when you start delving into the details, when you start getting into the specifics, when you start processing data, when you start doing data analysis, when you start to look at the various minutia that's involved in dealing with data, what you're going to find is that a lot of the things people think or believe to be true, they're not. They're not. They're not correct. They're not valid. They're not true. And by the way, in my mind, one of the examples is elections. But the big problem that I see is not the elections themselves, but how people actually look at their own wants and desires with regard to what they think will be desirable in a leader, lawmaker, whatever, right? That's the first problem. And this is the first issue, by the way, of an informed electorate. To me, part of being informed is understanding the details. Okay, it's getting the details. There are some people who I very much am of a mind with, am akin to, because they're interested in those details. And there are some other people who kind of annoy me at times, who talk on both sides, on all sides, from all perspectives. I'll put it that way. They talk from all perspectives. And it's very obvious that they are not paying attention to details that are significant to whatever it is that they're talking about. And they're quite annoying to me for that. It's not that I can't live with it, and it's not that I can't deal with it. But a lot of times I deal with people who I just have to shut my mouth, because if I speak my mind, I will either be ridiculed or belittled, because most people are not detail-oriented, or people will scratch their heads, or they will ignore me or whatever, because what they see and hear and so forth in me is somebody who is going to take the wind out of their sails lots of times, because they're not doing the things that they need to do in order to have proper understanding of the things that they're looking at. And that's a major problem for me. And it's just gotten worse as I've gotten older, because I've begun to realize what details do matter, what details don't matter, and how much people don't tend to consider or keep in mind those details. But I'll just tell you that it's sort of a blessing and a curse, because it allows you to look at the world and see what's really going on in lots of instances, and ignore things that aren't important and consider things that are. But at the same time, it means that you find yourself at odds with a lot of the people around you, because they do not traffic details. That's not something that most people do very well. They're not very good at dealing with details. They're much better at looking at the overall picture, and that seems good. But that's where things like the ends justify the means come from. And let me just tell you, that's not true. All right, I need to wrap it up, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Today is Monday. As I say, it is the 23rd of November of 2020. That means tomorrow will be Tuesday, the 24th of 2020, and hopefully I'll be able to put out another Daily Summation tomorrow. Again, I appreciate everybody on Rumble, the podcast, and YouTube tuning in. Remember that you can find my podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Thanks again for tuning in. Hopefully you will have a good day, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on Monday, the 23rd of November 2020. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for checking out this video. Remember that you can like it on YouTube and you can give it a rumble on Rumble if you want to do that. I have channels on both YouTube and Rumble. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels. You can subscribe to either one of those if you want to do so. Remember, if you subscribe on YouTube, you probably want to click the notification bell in order to be notified of new content. If you want to see more from me, you can check me out on my blog. That's blogs.kpschubert.com, blogs.kpschubert.com. You can also see my Facebook page. That is Kurt's Religion and Politics on Facebook. You can check out my Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com accounts. My handle on all three of those is at kpschubert. That's at kpschubert. You can check out my podcast. The podcast is at podcasts.kpschubert.com. That's podcast.kpschubert.com. And finally, you can check me out on Patreon. And if you want to support me, that's probably one of the better places that you can do that. I am Kurt's Religion and Politics there. Thanks again for checking out this video, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.